All right. Well, hello, and thanks for joining us today as we explore our webinar topic, Lots of Changes, More of the Same, a domestic and international freight market update. For those joining us for the first time, we at M33 host an educational series to empower our clients and prospects with market intelligence to help make better business decisions. Next month, we'll be publishing a white paper on the differences between a 3PL and a 4PL lead logistics provider. Then in September, our next webinar topic will be about using Lean Six Sigma practices and managing logistics. So please make sure that you're receiving our communications and connected with us. So let me go ahead and introduce myself. My name is Matt Foster with M33 Integrated Solutions here in Greenville, South Carolina. I've been in the industry for over 5 years now and bring with me a vast knowledge of the domestic and international transportation market with a passion of staying in tune with current regulations and economic trends. I also have the pleasure of introducing a guest speaker with us today, a friend and an expert, Brett Lofton with American Tire Distributors. Brett has been on all sides of the logistics industry, working for the U.S. Marine Corps and other large shippers and carriers over his 18-plus years of experience. American Tire is the nation's largest tire distributor with over 108 distribution centers. Brett, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Matt.
So to begin, we're going to talk today many topics, and I encourage you to submit your questions throughout the presentation, and Brett and I will be happy to answer them at the end. Our goal is to review current market conditions and future trends in all modes, such as truckload, LTL, air, rail, and ocean. We will also explore recent regulation changes and hear from Brett about the impact of the new hours of service rule that went into effect on July 1st, CSA, and the driver shortage crisis. I will then give everyone an update on the new South Carolina inland port coming online in October, and conclude with tips for being competitive in the market. So over-the-road trucking, analysts are seeing 1 to 2% cost increase year over year, with increased volumes of about 2.9%. There are a lot of factors that affect the trucking sector, such as regulation changes and rising costs. But more so, there's been very weak and inconsistent shipment volumes with a strong pressure to hold rates. It's interesting to take a look at capacity planning because you've, on this call, done a better job with managing and distributing your inventory. Yes, there's still a produce season, and yes, there's still a traditional peak holiday season, but their impact is becoming minimal on capacity and rates. More and more shippers are trending towards a 4PL management, which means that a lead logistics provider can manage both asset-based and multiple broker relationships to leverage the spot market and contractual market with real-time transparency to make the best decision each and every time. Truck capacity is still walking a fine line, but it's increased about 13% year over year with the new replacement truck purchases and collaboration amongst carriers that we'll talk a little bit more about in the LTL slide. Current utilization rates are at a high 97%. So with a 2 to 3% GDP increase, we could easily see this capacity being an issue in the future as the qualified driver shortage grows from 30,000 drivers today to over 100,000 needed in 2016. Let's talk about truckload rates predictions because this is there's a wide range, ranging from just 0.5% to 6.5% increase based on pretty much the supply and demand, with recognizing that there could be some challenges with the supply and demand availability of carriers and the economic increases, as well as the regulation changes. The famous slogan, "Trucks bring it," over 90% of our consumables are delivered via truck at some point during transit. And so here you'll notice that the benchmark at $1.55 can show us that there is going to be, without fuel, an estimated range between 0.5% and 6.5% going through the end of 2014. Moving on to the LTL market, it's a $32 billion industry in comparison to the truckload industry at $280 billion. The volumes have been really flat as the customer focus for LTL companies have been industrial. Now, analysts are predicting growth, but only at a small rate of 2.95%. But rates are still going up, an average 5 to 6% annually. Technology continues to improve with taking out cost drivers and creating efficiencies. We take advantage of more real-time tracking as it's becoming prevalent with constant EDI updates and notifications for exception management. We're also recognizing that more regional LTL carriers are developing interline agreements to share freight and capacity under one pro number. And so technology has really helped facilitate this process and improve the service, because otherwise LTL carriers would be forced to leave freight at the terminal until they had enough going to a destination, unless, of course, guaranteed service was added. So let's look at the LTL supply and demand chart here. LTL carriers are purposely cutting capacity year over year to help improve their margins. So you can notice the trend of the LTL tonnage increasing, however the fleet size is decreasing. And looking at our future predictions for LTL, we see increases, and our Carrier Relations Division is responsible to negotiate and mitigate those proposed GRIs to a lower level, but it has been shown here moving to the end of December 2014, the actual realized percentage increase could be 1 to 4%. Now, I got a quick question for you. I get asked a lot, who is the largest LTL carrier out there in the marketplace? And that's a great question. And FedEx currently has the largest market share at $5.4 billion. YRC is number 2 at $4.8 billion. And then Conway is number 3 at $3.4 billion. So let's talk about air. Air is the fastest way to get goods from point A to point B. The demand for air has been declining due to the better job that you guys on this call have been doing with managing your inventory. Quite frankly, air revenue increased 3.1%, but tonnage declined 2.2%. Most of that is due to fuel being up about 2.9%, but the airline industry, the passenger airline industry, is capitalizing on taking market share from cargo freighters by growing volumes of cargo in their bellies. It's a very profitable business form at a margin of 65% for our U.S. passenger airline companies, as more people are bringing on carry-ons into the cabin, leaving more space in the belly for cargo freight. Here's a slide on the air freight demand. As you can see, it is continuing its decline. Analysts are saying that it's going to continue to decline slightly. It is still a very market controlled by the airline industry based on the capacity, and so it's going to be hard for them to keep the rates at the level they're at with just the changing behavior from the shippers. Rail. Transportation's costs are up 4.9% year over year, and it's because it's competing directly with the over-the-road trucking industry. There have been some huge investments being made each year in the rail infrastructure, with over $13 billion going towards the 150,000 miles in the U.S. rail network. Many large shippers are taking advantage of the near proximity to a ramp and leveraging the short rail system. Rates are predicted to rise 3.5%, but the rail is ready to take on excess freight when over-the-road cannot handle the volume, thanks to their flexible capacity with freight cars and storage. Now, I love this famous CSX slogan because it does a great job with explaining the efficiencies of rail. 1 ton of freight, 423 miles, 1 gallon of fuel. Here is a chart just showing how volatile the truckload and rail volume is in 2013 by month. So it's pretty interesting to notice the intermodal decline in March, but it's back up in May. and that is mostly due to the fact that produce season hits around the May, June, July timeframe, and there's a lot of mode conversion to rail. All right, so ocean shipping has had quite a challenging year. There was a 1% cost decline for shippers with an average head haul rate of $2,400 without bunker or fuel surcharge per 40 equivalent units. That's a 40-foot container. We've seen a 2.5% decline in volume, but predict a slight increase as the economy improves of about 1 to 1.6%. Capacity has increased 7.2% and is actually expected to rise to 10% due to the new deliveries of vessels coming online. To reduce costs, we've seen steam lines trend towards a process called slow steaming as the new norm. This impact results in an extra transit week from China. Now, carriers often try to propose peak season surcharges and GRIs, but actually many of them this year have failed to stick. However, with the holiday shipping season right around the corner, we predict that one will soon be implemented. Now, a contributing factor to the decline in ocean shipping is nearshoring. I know we've heard this a lot, but many manufacturers are bringing industry back to the United States because of technological advances and efficiencies. We've also seen a lot of business going to Mexico and South America to take advantage of the lower cost labor. Here's a chart that shows the tonnage in millions of TEUs, which is 20 equivalent units. And you can recognize that the year 2013, currently on a down slope, but traditionally with the season, it has been trending up. All right, now let me share with you about the U.S. Customs and Border Protection announced that it began the liquidated damages phase of the importer security filing on July 9th of this year. These ISF enforcements phases are designed to help the CBP make more informed decisions regarding high-risk U.S.-bound cargo. Fines of $5,000 per violation will be issued for inaccurate, incomplete, or untimely filings. The CBP may also withhold the release or transfer of cargo for which an ISF has not been filed. While many shippers have slacked off with ISF compliance, this will all change with these hefty fines. Freight forwarders and NVOCCs will be a lot more stringent in requiring this document at least 24 hours prior to loading on a vessel heading to the United States. So, quick question for you. Who is responsible for any errors on import documentations? Is it the shipper? Is it the importer of record? Or is it your freight forwarder NVOCC? Even though your freight forwarder, your NVOCC, your customs broker does the paperwork for you, ultimately the importer of record is responsible for all accuracy and all fines related to incorrect or untimely filings. So you also need to make sure that your partners are managing this process smoothly. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and let Brett give us an update on some new domestic regulations. Brett?
Oh, thanks, Matt. First off, the CSA has been in effect for over 2 years now. The hours of service went in effect for January 1st. And over the past 2 years, we have experienced an 8% decline in roadside violations. And those address the problems in that pie chart to the right. It's based in those categories. They want to make drivers more safe to prevent a lot of accidents that we incur from fatigued drivers on being on the road. Matt, you can go to the next slide.
Oh.
And this is basically where they measure the safety of the drivers between unsafe drivers, fatigued drivers, driver fitness. These different issues will build points up against the carrier to determine their safety ratings. and that affects their cargo insurance or the insurance for the insurability for the drivers with the carriers. Next slide, Matt. Now, with the hours of service, this is how a lot of shippers are affected. Effective January 1st, drivers can drive a max of 70 hours in 8 days. They limit it to a 14-hour work day, and of that 14 hours, they can only drive 11. And in that 11 hours, they are required to take a 30-minute break in the first 8 hours. And in that, drivers lose productivity for shippers. Say, for instance, if I have a shipment that's picking up at 08 in the morning and the carrier arrive on time and my freight is floor loaded, and we give him max out 3 hours to floor load the freight to load it. So in his 14-hour day, we already ate up 3 hours of his drive time of being on the clock. So now he only has a limited amount of hours to drive, and in his first 8, he has to take another 30-minute break. And studies show that that 30-minute break really equates to be 50 minutes because carriers just can't pull over on the side of the road. They have to find somewhere safe to park so they won't get a ticket by DOT. So in actuality, he really only have 10 hours to drive. So if a carrier get held up at his delivery or his next reload, that really factors into his productivity for that load and for that week, because you never want a carrier to run out of hours while he still have your load on, because he has to take a 34-hour reset after 70 hours of working. And that in that 34 hours is mandatory that he have 2 consecutive nights of from 01 to 05 off the clock to do whatever he want to do at his leisure. And it's the estimated cost due to the hours of service that the shipping industry will be impacted by $322 million. And by most carriers, bigger carriers already have e-logs inside of their trailers, but some of the smaller carriers don't. They still work off their log books, but by 2015, it's going to be enforced that all carriers over the road will have e-logs. And the majority of the carriers on the road now are owner-operators. So these carriers will be impacted, which would slowly impact the shippers, will involve making the freight costs go up. And we will start to see rates creep up, and more people will start diverting to ship rail, which in turn, with the supply and demand, will go higher, so the rail rates will slowly increase. Matt, you can go next slide. All right. Now with the industry tightening the restraints, the industry is short 30,000 drivers, and the average pay for drivers is little under 40 cents a mile. And the average age for drivers is 54 years old, and the driver turnover right now is above 65%, and only 17% of the drivers are under the age of 35. So as Matt stated before, by 2015, I believe, or 16, we need about 100,000 over-the-road drivers to really sustain to keep product moving in and throughout the United States of America.
Wow. Well, thank you, Brett. I appreciate it. So many of you on this call are located in the Southeast, and you might have heard about the South Carolina Inland Port. Well, due to the record amount of rain we've been experiencing, the new completion date is now slated for October 2013. We are literally redefining near port with a $47 million capital investment, and coming soon is an overnight rail service 212 miles inland in Greer, South Carolina. It's serviced by Norfolk Southern exclusively, and containers can be drayed to and from the Port of Greer to the Port of Charleston. This will eliminate 50,000 dray truck moves on I-26 and I-85. They're heavy passenger highways. The shipper or consignee is also expected to benefit and save approximately $150 to $200 a container. Plus, rail has a much lower carbon footprint. So this is a huge opportunity for shippers in the upstate of South Carolina, and this is my favorite slide here, because we can service a third of the entire U.S. population next day. And if you take a look at this chart, it shows you with the 500-mile range, we can reach 94 million consumers from the Port of Greer. Now, wrapping up, let me share with you a few takeaway tips to help be competitive in the market. It is suggested that you review monthly or quarterly your data by understanding how you're performing in the marketplace. Tools such as raters can help provide the visibility of historical benchmarks, current rates, and market intelligence on the current conditions so that your products remain competitively priced. Now, based on the commodity, logistics can cost anywhere from 4 to 10% of gross sales, and so any increase is a tangible expense. Modal optimization analysis. Are you using the best mode and the best carrier each and every time? Shippers are driving freight to be more economical modes. For example, air to ocean, air to ground, truckload to rail, or LTL to truckload. Collaboration opportunities. When buying transportation capacity, one is buying both weight and cube. So it pays to think of capacity in more than one dimension. A lead logistics provider can introduce you to the shippers and the client network of compatible products to make them aware of the responsibilities and benefits of a mutual partnerships. For example, if you ship a high-density, heavy product, then maybe there's a way to utilize the empty space to stack a light and low-density product on top. You can share the cost benefits with complete transparency. TMS. Shippers are understanding that technology can help them co-manage their freight and serve as a tool to make freight a core competency for their organization with a streamlined process, reducing overall costs and meeting or exceeding service levels. Shippers will also benefit from the visibility of KPIs, carrier scorecards, and an automated process flow. So that concludes our presentation. Thanks for joining us today. Now we're going to answer some of your questions. All right, looks like we got one question here. Is there anything that's helping to increase capacity on the truckload side? Well, that's a great question. Really, the only potential is maybe immigration reform, but I don't want to get into that debate right now. There's actually a lot more factors that are reducing capacity, such as CSA, hours of service, the EOBR mandate, the electronic onboard recorder mandate, increased enforcement of regulations, and higher equipment costs. I hope that answered your question. Any other questions? All right. Well, listen, if you do have other questions, please feel free to shoot me an email. My information is shown on the screen. We appreciate your time today. Brett, thank you for joining us, and we look forward to communicating with you soon. Take care.